Hello, everybody. Good morning, guten tag, buenos dias, dobro outro. Thank you for joining us for this is the fifth in our new realities talks. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jordan Huggins. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. First of all, from all of us here at Alvanon, I just want to say we hope that you're well. We hope you're staying safe. We hope you're staying sane. But really, thank you again for joining us. I will be moderating today's webinar. The talk today will run about 30 minutes. We're going to leave plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. So if you'd like to submit any questions, you can do that in your questions drop-down panel in your GoToWebinar portal. If you have any technical issues today, you can chat me directly via the chat box. It's a drop-down menu also in your GoToWebinar portal. Now, without any further ado from me, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's speakers. We're very lucky to have, in these busy times, Don Howard, our Executive Director of Consulting, and Emily Robertson-Hood, who is a Senior Consultant here with Alvanon. Emily, Don, why don't you guys go ahead and take it away?
Thank you, Jordan, and welcome, everyone. It's good to be with you again. If you were with us last week, we discussed what we'd learned from industry partners about some of the challenges they're having working remotely, and also some of the creative solutions they used as workarounds. Now, it's important to note that workarounds are just that. They're techniques that you might develop in the moment when regular ways of working are really not possible.
Yeah, hi Don. Some of these workarounds are the consequence of working from home. Like we can see on the screen, household distractions were rated very high for some of our attendees. Your pets, your spouse, kids, we can all acknowledge that these exist. I think the important question to ask is, what did we learn from working remotely? And how did it impact the fit approval process and your ability to get to fit approval? Here's a poll that we took on the last webinar, ranking those difficulties. I think this is very interesting. Probably about a third of the people responded and said, what are their main challenges right now? And obviously, some of these are due to circumstances. For example, isolation and household distraction. Those are circumstances where we happen to be in. Access to your fitting tools, for example, the fit form and model, and then some of them are process issues like getting samples. I mean, that was really challenging for some people, and decision making. So the workarounds that were used during this crisis may have uncovered some holes in our process or fit tools that impact the approval process. So, we're in the midst of an industry-wide upheaval, and the path forward was summed up really succinctly by the Business of Fashion and McKinsey & Co. The coronavirus has sent shockwaves through the fashion industry, forcing companies to rapidly dispense with age-old industry practices and create new ones just to stay afloat. We felt that at home, and I think we're going to feel that going forward. In doing so, it's exposed long overdue upgrades required by the fashion system that is ripe for disruption.
Yeah, Emily, and then that, of course, just begs the question, what upgrades will you need to move forward as a brand? As you were going through this, did you find that this triage approach may have revealed smarter ways of working? Were there elements of your process or tools that proved to be really lifesavers? And what were you missing? Basically, how were you able to get your work done?
Well, the good news is that we took some learnings away from working remotely. As they say, there's always a bright side to every challenge that we have. And while they're still fresh in our brains, now is really the time to react to those. Most of us were indeed able to keep working. Huge accomplishment right there. Meeting attendance and process was scaled back, yet decisions still got made. As processes evolve, these experiences might help inform who needs to do what as we move forward.
That's so true. And also, as the poll indicated, obviously things like having access to your fit form was invaluable. Many brands found creative ways to keep using their fit models, and they were vital in giving feedback, and that's something we've come to rely on. And it was great that we could see them keep working as important contributors to the fit approval process as well.
It was interesting to note that brands that have a strong block program in place were able to delegate or fast track their approvals. This kept the process flowing, and even better, resources weren't spent shipping those samples.
So true. And naturally, something like fitting physical size runs wouldn't be possible. We may have people in several sizes in our households, but certainly not all sizes or even jump sizes to check how a garment grade might be performing in any kind of methodical way.
Lastly, many brands now see the value in working in 3D. Their teams do too. Consumers are expecting more in digital. I mean, we've all spent a significant amount of time on the internet, let's face it, and brands are going to need to rise to meet that expectation. So product development teams are going to be expected to fall in step with this. This will be challenging if you don't already have the standards in place to make that leap from 2D to 3D.
Well, you just said a mouthful, Emily. So let's talk a minute about standards. And they really are the fundamentals to the fit approval process. And I love this quote. It survives any industry in general, but it's so overlooked in our own apparel industry. Without a standard, there really is no logical basis for decision making or taking action. And this might seem very simplistic, but size and fit standardization in apparel is not always well defined or well understood, especially amongst the cross-functional teams. For example, when we work with brands on standardization, we may typically ask a few questions. What do you consider as your standard? And some common responses might be surprising. A very common response is our size chart. Our online size chart is our standard, but really an online size chart is really a guide for customers. It's a communication tool to choose the right size. We also might hear someone tell us that their graded specs are their standards, and that's also not accurate, because a graded spec is nothing more than a contractual agreement with a manufacturer on a specific garment, right? And then we also hear about things like body measurement tables. And body measurement tables are kind of anthropometric research numbers, and they usually revolve around averages. They're hard to interpret. And really, again, none of these answers really would constitute a true standard, because at the end of the day, a true standard should always link back to or reflect your target customer. So just really fundamentally breaking it down here, the brands who are able to bring their fit forms, and here's an example of a fit form, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, and enable the fit process to keep moving, right? And the ideal fit form is developed with your target customer in mind, right? It would start with a data-based understanding of what your body looks like, getting a realistic picture of their shape, their stature, and their measurements, right? This physical fit stand, fit dummy, fit form, wherever you are in the world, it's a visual representation of your target customer. So it serves as a tool, a common tool for industry and for garment evaluation. So when you're fitting on that form, you're getting a really good idea of what your customer is going to experience. And of course, having that fit form at the source base allows your suppliers to fit to the same customer profile.
We heard of another fundamental tool that kept the process moving and supports consistent fit, and that was the garment block. These are one of the most useful tools and one of the most misunderstood.
That is so true. Yeah, many brands will say they use blocks if you ask them, but there are so many different methodologies and versions that exist. So, not only the block, but a well-structured block library is another important component of your fundamentals, right? We often ask brands that use blocks, how many blocks are in your library? And if we hear the answer that's in the 100s or more, we know that it's really truly not a block library, but probably a collection of reference styles, which would definitely not be a best practice and certainly not be considered blocks.
Don, I've heard the same thing time and again. So let's clarify what blocks really are. Garment blocks are developed on and they map to your fit form or stand. They're developed from the form, using the form's shape and measurements, and they incorporate balance from the very beginning of their creation. So these blocks should be balanced, they're balanced to the form. These basic blocks should be trendless. This is especially important since they can take some real skill and time to develop. Since they're mapped to the standard form, they'll fit for as long as that standard body is used. And let's face it, Don, I think we've all seen some fit forms that are really, really well loved and well used. Blocks should not be recreated each year. This leads to inconsistent fit. And as we all know, inconsistent fit is an often cited reason for product returns. And lastly, blocks should not be design styles. They're very basic representations of the brand's typical product types: trousers, blouses, dresses, so on. Now, working from home was not the time to be changing up your brand's garment grade, and hopefully no one was. In a perfect world, grade is developed through thoughtful body analysis.
Yeah, so again, using data to inform how to accommodate body growth and shape evolution in that targeted demographic is what we refer to as an optimized grading, right? It mirrors how the garments get bigger and smaller in the size range versus the actual bodies themselves. So the goal of garment grading should be to maintain pattern balance and appropriate shape, not only for construction, but also for production feasibility. So, in short, these three fundamental tools, forms, blocks, and grading, will ensure consistent sizing no matter what size the product is in the range or where in the source space it's made. So we know for a fact that brands who have established these key fundamentals are much more likely to get the fit approval quicker and with fewer sample iterations. So, and another important thing to acknowledge here is this is, of course, only possible if these tools are implemented and used not only in the home offices, but throughout the supply chain. It's really the foundation of getting your 2D house in order.
Don, I think we understand that working remotely has exposed some gaping holes in our toolkit that hampered us from working more efficiently. Some of us had holes, some of us were grateful that we had the tools, but let's just try to sum up and explain what we mean by getting our 2D house in order.
Sure. It's identifying, again, that size, shape of the target customer using data and developing the underlying tools that create fit consistency. These are the things that you can physically touch, right, in your house. You use them like the fit form or the blocks, and it's the system of tools and methodologies so that you don't have to start from scratch every time you develop a product. So, and we know today there's no shortage of data that helps us to identify and define what the appropriate standard or standards should be for a brand. You can use body scans and scan data. Of course, it has to be interpreted. And applying commercial fit analysis can help a brand fine-tune both their core fitting size and optimize their grade. This defines the cornerstones of standardization in what we would call your 2D environment. Again, like I mentioned, blocks libraries properly established. Many brands say they use blocks, but there are many different methods, as we've mentioned, that exist. And a well-structured block library is another important component of getting your 2D house in order. So what we're seeing in these turbulent times has really confirmed what we've seen over the years, and that brands who have key sizing and standardization fundamental tools in place systemically keep their businesses running efficiently with less effort than those without those adequate tools and processes. And by the way, a very important byproduct of that is over the years that we've seen brands who use this methodology and have their 2D house in order achieve up to 90% approval rates on first sample submit from vendors. And some of you in the audience probably are there and you know what I'm talking about. Some of you might be scratching your head and saying, well, how the heck do you do that? But we do know that these methods are proven to have that result.
Wow, that is that's a dream and, frankly, a strategic objective for many brands. That's absolutely amazing. So we've heard the need to evolve. We heard that over and over again. The McKinsey statement spoke to that. We read about that all the time, and certainly we've been pushed on it for a long time. We also know that we need to work more efficiently as we come out of this crisis. So for many of us, it means dialing up our 3D initiatives. We're going to get pushed to do this. So how will these 2D tools evolve as we head into 3D?
Yeah, and again, we're talking about in terms of fit standardization in 3D. We're not talking about using 3D for colorways, print scaling, or other decision-making applications, which make 3D such a wonderful tool to begin with. Those are the aesthetic choices that don't have anything to do with kind of getting your technical 2D house in order. We're talking again about fit and sizing standardization. So sizing standardization and fit consistency are going to inform the decision-making process. They keep the development process moving, and they allow flexibility within your source space. So, and if your 2D standards are faulty, 3D is certainly not going to improve them. I mean, as a matter of fact, it might even make it worse.
Yeah, we've seen that before. And by the way, Don, 3D is viewed as a sustainable best practice. This is very apropos since today is actually the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. I don't know if you knew that or not, but happy Earth Day, everybody.
Yes, Emily, thank you. I was aware it's Earth Day, and yet another good reason to strive for fit approval on the first sample submit. It's sustainable.
Yeah, so 3D is something that is going to be all very much on our mind, and we've heard about the benefits during this crisis. And rushing into it without really understanding the implications, not only to body measurements but to shape and proportion, is really ill-informed. So I love this example that we've got up on the screen now. It's an example of creating your own avatars and calling them a standard. This example was done in 3 different programs, and only the middle one takes data into consideration. It considers proportion, body mass, and the distribution of that body mass. Can you see the differences? Look at the stance, which is affected by footwear choices. And then also take a look at the body mass placement at the seat and the chest. They're really quite different, aren't they?
Oh my God, it's a dangerous way to develop a fit and sizing standard. So yes, they're quite different. So Emily, let's just recap fit fundamentals 2D into 3D, right? Once sizing and fit standardization is established in place, you can focus on repeatable products and rapid innovation that allows your brand to develop products across multiple source spaces with consistency. So these standard physical forms will sync to a live model, right? Your other tool in garment evaluation. You have blocks that sync to that standard form, right? And it would also blocks optimal grade would be critical, really, to support the e-commerce tools like Fit Predictor. So having that exact replica of your fit form in 3D, right? Having your blocks available in 3D, and also having multi-size avatars to are accurate to the full size grade. And I can't stress enough the importance of a standardization that supports the e-com tool like Fit Predictors, because at the end of the day, they're driven by the data that we feed in, and they're only as accurate as the data and the consistency of fit and sizing standardization. That's a very important statement for all of these things to work together in 3D. So these 2D fundamentals will help you launch successfully into 3D, right? And so in light of working remotely, we certainly haven't been able to see size sets, that's for sure. Like I said, unless we don't have our friends and colleagues that we typically have around us to set up these size trials. So we know this has made people think about 3D in another way, and that includes full size sets of avatars.
Yeah, let's just refresh our memories. Anyone who's had to post notices at work for size run try-ons will appreciate size set avatars. What we're showing here, sounds like you've done that, Don. This the traditional method. You round up people that are somewhat close to the size chart, and then you just hope that they show up for the fitting.
And we all know how painful that can be. So the good news about 3D is once you've got that core body standard, that's your identical avatar that you're using in the physical, you could develop a size range of what the people actually look like throughout that range. So the 3D offers a great way to do a size set review of products. This is, of course, an example of data-defined bodies in a size range. And while you'll still want to validate range, motion, and product comfort on people, once you really have a good set of blocks and your fit standard has been proven to be trusted, the need for that is also going to be diminished.
Yeah, we heard that from the brands we spoke to, so it was nice to hear that that was actually borne out. In the past, some brands have developed physical fit forms in the size range or even in jump sizes to evaluate smaller and larger sizes in the range. Kids wear, this is very, very popular, as is it in Missy, where you'll go into the plus size straight up. But working remotely hasn't made seeing those jump sizes possible. As a consequence, you know, what's happened is our work queue here at Alvanon is a mile long with customers wanting to get 3D versions of their physical size set. So not surprising at all. And using these size sets and having them developed from data really gives you a realistic view of how the product looks on each people. And guess what, Don? It alleviates the hunt for people in every size or even jump sizes.
Yes, it does.
So another point was made by brands we talked to, that the right having the right standard tools in place could keep some of the product reviews out at their suppliers or their hubs, which is really ideal. If you have training or certification programs in place with suppliers and need to travel to train them, no doubt this has come to a standstill. Many brands we've spoken to have either frozen travel budgets or team members are reluctant to travel. So that begs the question, how do you empower or certify your source base when you and they can't travel? Who's ensuring compliance during this time of shifting sources?
So this is such an important concept. You know, when we talk, again, getting your 2D house in order includes having your vendors trained, and in many cases, there are brands that go to the extent of certifying certain vendors to have certain rights for fit approval, right? And that can only happen if all of these tools are in place. You know, we had a recent example, kind of anecdotally, of lack of compliance where a major brand thought that their vendors were in full compliance. And it occurred because they were doing marathon fit sessions by video conference with the vendors, and they noticed that the vendors, many of them, were not even using the actual tools that they needed to, namely the fit form. So let me tell you, that would have been a rude awakening.
Oh man, I bet that was. So, you know, what was really interesting is that many brands we spoke to who did have an empowered source base were able to get samples approved overseas. Now, this was great because it alleviated the need to have the samples shipped here. Having an e-certification program in place when you can't get vendors up and running is another way to roll. And since we're hearing about the quest for shorter turn times and nearshoring, having access to that e-certification to empower suppliers or to bring new ones on board will certainly ensure that brand standards and tools are used after these training sessions. As we evolve into a more digital environment, one thing that's going to need to evolve to are skill sets and processes. Can't go into digital with analog mindset. And Don, I know you and I have talked about when we were hiring managers in the industry. I know I was always on the lookout for people who are willing to evolve. While deep industry experience is really useful in providing the hands-on skills we need, being able to demonstrate the capacity to change is critical and desirable to employers.
Oh, that is so important. I mean, the only thing that's certain in life is change. And, you know, over the years, we've seen a lot of different ways that people adapt their skill sets. I remember just anecdotally in the 90s when we were trying to get pattern makers on Gerber's silhouette, right? And roughly a third of them would be all in and jumping into the opportunity. Roughly a third of them would just kind of cross their arms and say no thank you, and about a third of them were somewhere in the middle, right? And it's no different than it is today. You know, even simple examples, Emily, like you and I over the last couple of weeks are used to working in a certain platform for doing our video conferences, right? And then we had to learn all these different platforms, Teams, Zoom, Blue Jeans, whatever, and just to have meetings with numerous brands. So we had to get along, right? We had everybody was kind of in the same boat, including us. So for those out there who want to further their skill sets and learn, you have access to so many resources. But as Emily mentioned, it's the desire to learn, the desire to be flexible and evolve. So just as an example, all of the senior consultants here at Alvanon have developed industry-based courses that are interesting, that might be interesting to you on motif.org. You can check that resource out. And if you have annual continual learning objectives, taking a number of online courses would certainly fulfill that objective. So kind of in summary here, I know we've kind of covered a lot of ground, but the recent crisis has really revealed holes in our processes and tools. But on the bright side, it's also shown our adaptability and highlighted fundamentals that work, right? So to help our brands, for all of us to thrive and even survive, we'll be called upon to move faster and engage in more responsive product development cycles. So we have to ask ourselves, you all have to ask yourselves the questions: where are the gaps in your tools and processes? Is your 2D house in order all the way around the dial? Because as we've noted, 3D without a 2D mastery will likely forfeit fit consistency and speed. It's going to be an illusion is what it's going to be. And another thing that's super important, we know that getting to fit approval quicker and striving for fit approval on the first sample submit should be a stretch goal for all brands by utilizing these kind of old and new fundamentals that are converging right now in 3D. As I said, I might be talking to brands right now that are already doing that. There are some brands out there who would say, I don't even know how we do that. And there are many brands somewhere on that continuum in between. So the question you have to ask yourselves are, how close are you to that sustainable stretch goal, which is very efficient, and it takes a lot of the inefficiency and expense out of the product development process. And you know what? If you don't know, figure out a plan. How are you going to get there? So with that, Emily, I think it's time for us to kind of toss it over to Jordan. Hopefully, the people in the audience were intrigued by what they heard, and hopefully they have some questions for us.
Yes, definitely. Don, Emily, thank you both so much. First of all, really great kind of going out and, finding out what's going on and what people are dealing with and everything. We do have some questions definitely coming in. This first one is related to fit, and it seems like fit approval. My company is asking technical designers, TDs, to approve fit by using only 3D images. Many of us are uncomfortable with this. Do you have any advice in regards to this?
Well, I guess my first question would be, how were you fit approving before you got into 3D, and what were your tools and process, just exactly like we got done speaking about? It's a very multi-layered question, because I don't know enough about what your criteria is for fit approval. But I would say blindly fitting off of a sample that's been sent to you or a 3D image would be kind of dangerous if, in fact, fit consistency is important to your brand. I get the desire to want to jump into 3D and have everything done in 3D, but as we've kind of laid out here in this webinar, is if you don't have your 2D house in order, approving in 3D is really kind of a pipe dream, I would say. Emily, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't want to say garbage in, garbage out, but there, what tools did you have in place building? Like, did you have blocks? Were your vendors certified, et cetera? And then the other thing is unilaterally across every category at the outset is unrealistic. Many, many times we've heard of people trying to build up wins with categories that are block-based or are graphic or blank-based. For example, graphic tees or men's shirts, things that have less change in it. So build up some wins and some learnings on those type of product, and then make your goal to be doing it 100%, but build up some wins and build up some tools.
Good point.
Great. Next question. Pretty simple. If I don't have blocks yet, what is the best way to get started building them?
Well, that's a good question. We advocate blocks, and we always say there's kind of 3 ways to do it. You can build your own blocks. You can outsource it to a third party. Alvanon provides blocks. I think another important thing to understand is when we're talking about these tools that exist, at Alvanon, we have a number of standard tools that exist that you can choose from. So, instead of going maybe to the expense of creating a very specific standard fit form and standard grade and standard blocks, we do have a number of those tools available as a shortcut. But there's no getting around the fact that if you don't have blocks, you're going to struggle with fit, sizing, consistency.
Great. Next question. What would you say is a realistic time plan for getting techs fairly proficient in 3D after achieving a proficiency in 2D pattern making? I believe this is at like a individual user level.
Emily, you want to take that?
Well, what some brands do is designate a super user and embed a super user or super users inside their brand to help support the other people that are learning. That to me has been one of the most successful ways. And, everybody learns at a different rate, but the super user immerses themselves fully in it and then embeds with the team to help support them. Actually embedding 3D within an organization can take a minimum of 3 years. It can take a little bit more, but on an individual basis, as I said, it really depends on what support they have, what their workload is. Are they expected to continue with their workload while they're learning, or how are they going to get what they need to do the job, their day-to-day job? Very interesting to note when we talk to some brands during this time. They use this time of isolation to be able to focus and build their 3D skills. So during this time, they were sort of giving themselves their own ramp-up time, which I love that as an example.
Yeah, the short of it is immersion. If you're immersed in it and you're continually doing it, obviously it's going to go quicker than if you're coming in and out of it.
Great. This next question, actually, I think it's a clarification. Don, you used the term fit predictors, and I think somebody was a little bit confused about that. So could you just define that in a little bit more detail? The full question is, Don used the term fit predictors. Could you define this, please? Or are you simply talking about prediction with the use of 3D?
Okay, so great question, and I'd love to clarify that. In today's world, we're hearing, it's been going on for at least 5 or 6 years now, where there are companies who have software, or even individual brands who might have their own software, who try to predict the consumer's fit so that they're more likely to get the best fit the first time they buy the product, right? So fit prediction software, or any kind of AI learning tool to predict the fit for an individual, is only going to be as successful as a consistent underlying fit standard that doesn't change. So when I said it was critical to success in fit prediction, that's what I mean. There are all types of people who are trying to guess or accurately predict a consumer's size in their range. But if the range is varying and is not consistent, the likelihood of getting the correct prediction is going to be lower. I hope that answers the question.
just to add to that is it is an e-com tool. It's how you make a size selection. Some people call it a size selector. It could have a sliding bar that asks you, how slopey are your shoulders or how wide is your waist. Those are fit prediction tools that, for example, are fed on the data that's been input into them. It's not us sitting in front of a crystal ball and saying, what size should my fit model be? That's not what a fit predictor is.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you both very much. We got a couple more questions. Have you seen success fitting difficult size categories in 3D? I think this is a little bit more subjective, anecdotal experience from you guys, but have you seen success fitting difficult sizes in 3D, i.e. denim jeans?
You can speak to denim. I'm happy to speak to outerwear, Emily.
Well, that's actually that's a great question because you've really hit on two of the most difficult products to try to put in an environment other than a hands-on fitting. Denim, difficult right there because of the variability of denim and the closeness to the body of the fit for most brands, and then extended size, either very, very small or very large. So it's a body that's got a lot of planes and angles and body mass distribution variability. So do we see brands working in 3D in denim in those extended size ranges? Yes, we do. I wouldn't say that we've seen people that are deeply accomplished because all of this is in its nascent or early stages. But people have made a brand objective. Although, Don, I think you've had an experience with a brand that started in denim, started in women's denim, and made it their objective to get up to speed in women's denim in 3D. Do you want to share that experience?
Absolutely. Pioneers in 3D and pioneers in a category that is very difficult. And we're talking 5 years ago, and I'm sure they've come a long way since then. But again, the 3D tool, at the end of the day, it is a tool, is only as good as the entire enterprise's capability. We see a lot of brands, I'll skip to outerwear, making complex product, and their source base is completely immersed in 3D. So, trying to do it on your own without, partners in the supply chain that are kind of at the same level or even more advanced than you are would always make it difficult. But the true success in 3D comes really for people who have skill at the vendor base that complement the things that they're doing in their research, their product development.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. I know we were aiming to get out of here around 10:40. I don't think our goal with these webinars is not to take up too much of everybody's time. There's enough going on. So maybe one or two more questions. This next one comes from Victoria. What skills will next generation pattern makers need going forward? It seems that tech skills change every 5 years or so.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple of bright spots here. We do know that there are several universities in the United States, for instance, and I'm sure they exist elsewhere in the world, where 3D and 3D pattern making is a core requirement. So you can't do pattern making in 3D until you understand pattern making on the flat, on the table, and the concepts. Those are concepts, we call them, fundamental skills that are not going to go away. They're just being used in a different format. So, and this is a good, again, this is going back to upgrading your skill sets. For those of you who have been in the industry for a while and have excellent pattern making skills, don't shy away from 3D because you're needed now more than ever. Your skill set will help teach younger people coming into industry, the tips and techniques and tricks to what is really an art is pattern making, right? Pattern making is an art. So I think that again, 3D is just a different way of doing it. But today there are a number of resources out there available for people who are first coming into industry, but you can't be successful pattern making in 3D until you understand what it's like in the physical. Emily, anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely. And I mean, pattern making is one thing, fitting is another, and fitting is a dying art. I hate to say, but that is, being able to create a pattern or give direction to modify patterns that doesn't knock the product out of balance is super important. And that is something that is that has to be learned and practiced after trial and error, and really working alongside experienced people in fitting. That would be one skill that I would say is going to be deeply desirable as we move forward, no matter what medium you're in.
Very desirable, absolutely. Hey, Jordan, maybe one more question. I think, we don't want to drag this out too much longer, even though we're happy to answer them. They're great questions coming in.
Yeah, sounds good. This last question comes from Veronica, and it's to do a proper fit and pattern analysis, do you believe this program is better for pattern making? And it just says program. I believe Veronica's referring to just like 3D design program in general. So to do a proper fit and pattern analysis, do you believe, brackets, the 3D programming is better for a pattern maker?
Don?
I don't think it's better or worse. Again, it's a new way of doing things. The new fundamentals rely on the old fundamental skills, and I hope that we've made that clear in this session. One of the things that is a truism that we know right now in 3D is everyone must prove concept. And what do I mean when I say that? Let's take the example of the physical fit form and a physical block on that fit form. You need to be able to replicate that in 3D so that you can prove the concept, right? So, and then take it a step further. If you're doing fitting and doing correction, you're going to have to know that if this manipulation was done in 3D, you're going to get the same result in the physical. That's going to be the way of the world for the next, couple of years at least, until we get to a day where maybe some people are so skilled at it that we could get to the point that we made earlier. How do I get my pattern to a point in 3D and my garment at a point in 3D that it's good enough that I know that for that first submit, it's going to be approvable or very close. So you're using the same concept. You're using the same end goal and objective. You're just using different tools to accomplish it.
Yeah, and I have forever advocated to my teams that I don't care how you manage it. If you can look at a screenshot or whatever, being able to overlay the supplier's pattern on top of your block is a very baseline thing that you can accomplish, be it in screenshots or 3D or whatever. But to me, that is one of the biggest benefits there.
Great, Don, Emily, any sign-off notes before we head out?
No, but again, I hope this was helpful. Again, what did we learn? What did we learn that works? What did we learn that doesn't work? And how do we get ourselves prepared for the future? Because the future is right now, and there's a lot to do, but we know for a fact that it's achievable. So I just appreciate everybody tuning in. Emily, thanks. It was a pleasure. And Jordan, you want to go ahead and take it home?
Yeah, Don, Emily, thank you guys so much again, and thank all of you for joining us today. Just a couple quick things. There were a lot of questions around skills and skills development stuff, and honestly, as marketing manager, I would be pretty remiss if I didn't mention the work that Alvanon, that we were doing really before all of this COVID-19 and everything. And really, I'm talking about our in-person workshops. We plan on doing them in the future, obviously, when the time is safe. I just wanted to draw your attention to it, that especially we had the Skills Builder Workshop, which is an in-person, kind of small group workshop led by our consultants like Donna and Emily. And it was all about the journey from 2D block development to 3D design. So I would urge you to at least keep it on your radar for the future, maybe end of the year, 2021, whenever we all start to get back to this new normal. You can head over to alvanon.com/workshops and just kind of keep an eye out for those. Thank you all again so much for joining us. We are going to send out a copy of this webinar and a PDF of the presentation deck to everybody that not only attended, but registered. So if you came in halfway through or whatever, don't worry, you're going to get a copy of everything. next week's webinar is our last webinar in our new reality series, and we're calling it Rebalancing the Global Supply Chain. It will be led by our very own CEO, Janice Wang, our Executive Director in Europe, Tom Weidenhoff, and our Business Development Director, Jill Coleman. And it's just kind of down to the brass tacks about what it's going to take to get back to a normal in the global supply chain. If you're looking for help in or a place to start with 3D, I'd urge you to go over to motif.org. We partnered with them, and they have a bunch of online courses that you guys can check out in the meantime. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope we'll see you and hear you next week.